The Murray-Darling Basin Tours. These annual tours were a New South Wales ACT Synod initiative and began in 2014 and have taken people around the basin to the lower and upper Murray, the Darling, the Murrumbidgee and finally the Northern Darling Basin. Each of the tours included public forums, visits to farms with irrigation, dry land farms, historical sites, as well as spending time with Indigenous groups and learning about the area's ecotourism. We learned a great deal, particularly that there are no easy answers to the problems surrounding the Murray-Darling. But through learning, we did provide a listening ear, which was badly needed. So many country folk feel forgotten, or at best misunderstood. And afterwards we went back to alert people about the needs of the farmers and the environmentalists. About the Murray. The Murray-Darling Basin covers approximately 13.8% of the total area of mainland Australia. The states it covers include Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, as well as the ACT. The three longest rivers in Australia all run through the Murray-Darling Basin. These are the Darling River, which is 2,740 kilometres, the Murray River, 2,520 kilometres, and the Murrumbidgee River, 1,575 kilometres. It contains over 40% of all Australian farms, which produce wool, cotton, wheat, sheep, cattle, dairy produce, rice, oilseed, wine, fruit and vegetables. It is also the home of at least 35 endangered species of birds, 16 species of endangered mammals, and over 35 different native fish species. The water in the Murray-Darling River system comes from a very small percentage of the basin area, mainly along the southern and eastern rim. Almost 86% of the vast catchment area contributes very little or no regular runoff to rivers. The rivers have very low gradients over most of their length, which unfortunately cause them to flow slowly. The basin also has a big variety of climatic conditions, depending on its location, including subtropical, cool, humid, temperate, hot and dry, and semi-arid and arid. The stakeholders of the Murray-Darling Basin face floods and droughts. This was a former waterhole, and the interests conflict. Environmentalists and irrigationists have very different ideas of how the water should be used. Other issues they deal with include farmers are in debt because they haven't been able to grow crops. Some irrigationists appear to have stolen water. People, well-meaning, give inappropriate help. For example, hampers are sent instead of fuel cards and food cards. This affects local businesses, which are then forced to close down. Erosion of soil, which is caused by winds and made worse by lack of education. I'm afraid the grey nomads are people that cause problems here. They have been known to park right next to the river bank, which damages the soil, and cut down trees to make fires. Tourist businesses also rely on people being able to fish or water ski, so they lose customers. My last trip, which was the third of the trips, was during the floods. This time there were 20 of us, including Meredith and Isobel, who are very sorry that they couldn't be here today. We travelled through the land, some of which had seen no rain for 5 years. It's very confronting seeing places that were once rivers empty. However, I still saw many of God's beautiful creations on our trips. I saw shells and a dinosaur bone, which are now also opals. This was $10,000, so I didn't bring it home. I went to an observatory, and through extraordinarily powerful telescopes, I saw Saturn's rings, 5 moons around Jupiter, and craters on our moon. And all the time knew that my glimpses were of the past, not the present. But more impressive than even those was the resilience of the human spirit in the face of ongoing difficulties and tragedies. I saw creativity used to attract tourists when businesses were failing. If you watched the ABC program Backroads, you might have seen the program on the town Thallon. They created two special buildings. One was painted silos and the other one was a wombat. You should be able to see them now on the next slide. There we are. Yeah, that's the wombat, quite a bit bigger than me. I think the things are on it so you can climb it if you want to, but we didn't. And these are the beautiful painted silos, and these are all to bring tourists to the area. I met women from drought-stricken farms who still spend regular time making sanitary packs so that the girls can go to school. I'd like to say here the lady was very discreet in how she was talking about this, and just talked about the importance of the girls having sanitary protection so they could continue their studies. But it's also actually to protect them from rape, because some of the men in the area believe that when a woman is menstruating, it can heal them of AIDS. So these life packs save lives. Okay, I also heard about communities dealing with pests with ongoing projects such as an annual codfish competition and planting reeds to prevent further soil erosion. And some communities work together to get a grant to build an exclusion fence to keep wild dogs away from their sheep. I met a farmer whose family has been fighting to keep mining off their lands for 2 generations. Farmers are very concerned about the effect that mining would have on the quality of their water in their area. When one of our crew asked if the local MPs were any help, she replied that despite the fact that they were National Party members, they were both pro-mining. Lock the Gate Alliance also share their concern. They report that mining encroaches on good farming land, disrupts other land uses in industry, clears bushland which damages biodiversity and causes air pollution, contamination or depletion of ground or surface water. It also impacts on the health of workers and nearby residents. But I'd like to tell you about one case now which I thought was very special. It's a bilby breeding program in Charleyville, Queensland. The bilby is a desert-dwelling marsupial omnivore. They're small with big ears and a long tongue and strong paws. And they use these strong front paws to dig deep holes in the soil that plant materials fall in and then decompose. At the same time, the soil is aerated from their digging, which then supports seed germination. So the bilby plays an important role in caring for the soil. However, bilbies are not designed to compete for food with rabbits, nor being torn apart by feral animals. The bilbies that you are looking at are the greater bilbies. The lesser bilby is now extinct. And the greater bilby is now listed as endangered in Queensland and as vulnerable nationally. In 1998, 2 men, Frank and Peter, launched a fund to construct the bilby fence in Karawinja National Park, where bilbies could live safely. Frank was a former Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service ranger, but his motivation to save the greater bilby from extinction arose from a night spotting trip that a friend took him out to cheer him up a bit after the death of his wife. He spotted a bilby, and that sighting led to a new focus for his life. Frank then began speaking to as many groups as he could about the importance of saving the bilby. Peter is a zoologist with the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service based in Charleyville for over 30 years. He designed and built the Karawinja fence with teams of conservation volunteers. The fence was designed with floppy sides so that when cats tried to climb up the fence, they lost their balance and fell off. In 2003, 30 captive bred bilbies were released to live happily ever after behind their 250-kilometre fence. Their population slowly built up to 300 bilbies, but the floods in 2013 damaged the bottom part of the fence. Burrowing predators got in, and only 10 bilbies survived. But the people who worked so hard to save the bilbies did not give up. The remaining bilbies were taken away, and the fence is being rebuilt with more secure metal. The education programs and funding and fundraising goes on. At the time we're in Charleyville, the local hotel was preparing for its local fur ball to raise money for the various projects related to bilby preservation. Now, in my last slide, here are some of the organisations you can support to help the people in the Murray-Darling Basin. Our moderator's Drought Appeals, which you can make a donation to during the service, Frontier Services, Lock the Gate Alliance, and the Charleyville Bilby Experience. I'm wearing a beautiful bilby necklace that I bought there, so I can show it to you afterwards if you like bilby jewellery. Thank you very much.
Hello, dear smiling faces. I'm sorry not to be with you today. I've been on 2 of the Murray-Darling Basin trips, this one and a previous one. I've learnt so much about myself. I've learnt about the land, the river, the mountain, and the sky. I've learnt that, though so complex, that distributive justice for the Murray-Darling River is what I yearn for, in common with many people who have their livelihood along it. That is my hope for the outback community. "20 people left Dubbo on Sunday the 29th of July to travel to the headwaters of the Darling River. We travelled up through Walgett, Lightning Ridge and St George to Charleyville. We stayed 2 nights in Charleyville, Queensland, then on to Roma and Surat, and returning into New South Wales to Moree, Narrabri, Coonabarabran and Dubbo. In Charleyville and the other stops, we mostly walked around alone, and in some ways it was very similar to many retreats I've experienced earlier in my life. I went to a small cafe, the Blue Gum Cafe, and here is a little piece of the decor in that rather old-fashioned watering hole. All the locals knew one another and came there for breakfast often, it seemed. As I walked around the streets, it was sad to see so many shops and businesses closed. One factor, though, stands out in my mind. Everywhere we went, I sensed that many people were just not giving up. There is still a resilience of the human spirit, even in the most hopeless situation, if people can talk it over with another. Another small cafe named Violet's Cafe was very new, just past 6 months of being open. Violet told me she needed repair surgery on her hip, though she was about 45 years old. She said, "I need to go to Brisbane, over 400 kilometres away, and my husband and staff of 2 will need to look after the cafe while I'm in hospital. It all seems so hard to me." The other place I'll mention is the town of Narrabri. My cousin Lockie also lives with the coal seam gas fracking right on his property, the Whitehaven coal mine. A noticeable shift now is that many of the young farmers and their partners are university trained. They understand the implications of the climate warming and also contend with fracking and now this terrible drought. The CSIRO have been diligent in educating the farmers as to climate change, their situation and also their rights. And between Narrabri and Gunnedah, there are no less than 6 wells fracking. My second broad reflection is on the state of the Uniting Church out beyond Dubbo. The drought is crippling the farmers, and yet farmers have also always contended with the unpredictability of the climate. Frontier Services is still caring for people out back. In both Gilgandra and Coonabarabran, where we worshipped, the tone of the worship was evangelical in nature, I suppose. But what stood out for me was the gracious evidence of the love and respect of every person in the midst of the congregation. I was reminded in Gilgandra by one of the younger women who came up to me and mentioned that I had officiated at her wedding back in 1986. Jim and I spent a little less than 1 year in Gilgandra in locum ministry. I met again some 91-year-old farmers, dear friends, who taught me so much about strains of wheat and so many other things. They still live on their farm and come into town every Sunday for worship. Gilgandra Church is a modern brick building built in 1986 and is a very practical building. The Sunday we worshipped in Gilgandra was the Sunday two of the lay women were commissioned to become lay presiders at Holy Communion. What was so noticeable about both Gilgandra and Coonabarabran is the love and care and genuine concern the people have for one another. In Coonabarabran, on the cold winter's Saturday night we arrived there, the church provided a meal for us, even in the throes of the 5-year drought they were experiencing, and not a word of complaint or gloom amongst them. Then the next day at worship, all the focus was on praise of God and a practical common sense sermon with plenty of choruses. And this is a poem I wrote for the Murray-Darling Basin. Grey-green blue gums, tired old river, knocked over mulgars for hungry cattle to eat the leaves. The terror of it all. Parched dry land, water so precious, with such a strong smell. The land is waiting. It calls us to love. It calls us to care, that no coal seam gas is extracted. It calls us to wait. It calls us to look, listen, learn and hope as it renews. Oh, the wonder of it all. I thank Mother Earth and the river, this glorious, wonderful river, that it might yet be, for all to have some justice and some share of it.